Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled The Keeper of Petals and names an enchanted tale of legacy and light. Evelina's first memory of the old manor was not the grand marble pillars or the endless corridors draped in velvet tapestries, but the faint, secret murmur of the wind through the rose arbor at midnight. It was as if the garden itself spoke in hushed tones, a language she could not fully understand, yet felt pulsating through her veins like a second heartbeat. On the night she turned 16, Gregory Hawthorne, a dignified widower with silvery hair and eyes that always seemed just on the verge of tears, led his only daughter to the stone bench beneath the ivy-laced archway. The moon, high and full, cast ghostly silver patterns across her pale cheeks and the petals of the white roses that climbed above them. "Listen, my starling," Gregory whispered, his voice trembling with a blend of pride and sorrow. "The garden remembers, even when we cannot." Evelina's heart fluttered at his words. She longed to ask what memories the garden held of her mother Seraphine, whose laughter once filled every corner of the estate like birdsong at dawn, but fear held her tongue. Instead, she leaned into his warm coat and let the cold, fragrant air fill her lungs. Somewhere deep in the maze of hedges, the trees sighed, and in that sigh, Evelina thought she heard her mother's name. The estate of Ravenswood Manor had stood for centuries on the mist-wreathed highlands, its windows like watchful eyes on the rolling moors below. Stories whispered among the villagers claimed that the Hawthorns were bound to the land by an ancient pact, a promise of loyalty so old that no living soul could recall its origin. Ages ago, Seraphine Hawthorne had been the last of a line of herbal healers, gifted with uncanny intuition and a kindness that mended broken limbs and broken hearts alike. When she married Gregory, she brought with her a legacy of whispered potions and midnight vigils beneath the full moon, tending to the wounded and lost creatures of the forest beyond. But the tranquility shattered when Seraphine fell ill, and no remedy proved potent enough to save her. Evelina, barely 5 at the time, remembered the hush that fell over the household, how laughter became an alien sound, how flowers wilted in their vases as if mourning alongside her father. The garden became their sanctuary, a living memorial of her mother's spirit. Gregory would wander its paths at dawn, gathering rosemary and lavender, as though trying to distill memory into herb and oil. Evelina followed him, silent and eyes wide, watching as he pressed petals between his palms, whispering incantations she did not yet understand. In the wake of Seraphine's passing, Evelina's world narrowed to the twin shadows of loss and longing. She learned early how to navigate her sorrow in silence, how to carry the weight of an absent smile in the curve of her throat. Yet even in her grief, a stubborn spark of curiosity burned. She devoured the brittle journals her mother left behind, tracing Seraphine's spidery script by candlelight, piecing together fragments of magic and herbal lore. In those pages, Evelina discovered that her mother spoke of the heart of night, a rare nocturnal blossom that opened only when the moon's silver reflected off still water. Legend said it carried a sliver of the moon's soul, capable of healing wounds no human art could touch. On the eve of her 16th birthday, Evelina decided to seek the heart of night in the garden's hidden pond. Gregory had never found it, though he claimed to have sought it every full moon since Seraphine's death. "It is a dangerous pursuit, my darling," he cautioned when he noticed her poring over the map he had once made of the garden's secret paths. "Some doors are best left unopened." But Evelina, whose courage was tempered by heartbreak, only bowed her head and continued her research in the heart-lit hours, learning to recognize the faint, silvery gleam of the blossom's petals in her imagination. That night, cloaked in her father's old wool shawl, Evelina slipped past the ancient oaken doors and into the cold embrace of the garden. The air was sharp and smelled of wet earth. A hush fell as she passed beneath the rose arbor, the same place where Gregory had shared his cryptic words. The rose petals, dusted with dew, glittered like stardust. She paused to brush her fingertips across a thorn stem, feeling the soft pulse of life. Guided by the silver glow of the moon and the quiet compass of her heart, she wound her way through parted hedges and arching yews until she reached the hidden pond. Its surface was as smooth as obsidian, reflecting the moon like a second, pale orb in the sky. Evelina knelt at the water's edge, heart pounding so fiercely she feared it might awaken the entire manor. She scanned the perimeter for the flower's sliver of light. For a moment, the pond lay barren, silent. Then, at the very center, a single blossom unfurled. Its petals were translucent as tears, each one edged with the glow of moonlight. A soft breeze stirred the air, carrying a barely audible melody, perhaps the garden's whisper, or her mother's lullaby. Evelina reached out with reverent fingers, the cool night air pricking her skin. As soon as her skin brushed the blossom, the gentle hum in the air swelled into a chorus of rustling leaves and sighing petals. The pond's surface rippled, and the moon's reflection shimmered like dancing spirits. Evelina gasped, heart seizing with awe and something deeper she could not name, a stirring of hope, a promise of healing. Abruptly, a voice called out from the shadows beyond the yew hedge. "Evelina!" Panic constricted her chest. She turned to see Gregory's tall, stooped figure emerge, lantern in hand, eyes wide with equal parts fear and relief. "I knew it," he whispered hoarsely, stepping forward. The lantern's warm glow revealed every line etched by grief around his eyes. "Father," she breathed, cradling the blossom as though it were her mother's own heart. "I had to find it." He came to her side and knelt in the soft turf. "And now that you have..." His voice trembled, but his gaze was filled with pride. "I feel her," Evelina replied, lifting the bloom between them. "I feel her in the petals. In the night." Her words trembled on the verge of tears. Gregory gently reached to touch the blossom, and as his fingers brushed the petals, the lantern's flame flickered, casting their shadows long and trembling against the hedge. For an instant, father and daughter held the fragile promise of the heart of night between them, two souls intertwined by loss, longing, and a newfound resolve to face whatever magic or peril lay ahead. When the sun's pale fingers crept through the arched windows of Ravenswood Manor the morning after Evelina's moonlit triumph, she awoke to a world that felt both familiar and irrevocably changed. The heart of night lay upon her dressing table, its translucent petals closed in daytime slumber, still faintly glowing with an otherworldly promise like embers waiting for the spark of dusk. Evelina sat up, drawing the wool shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her limbs ached with tiredness, but her heart thrummed with a quiet exhilaration. She had touched her mother's legacy, now she must prove herself worthy of its power. In the great hall below, the first stirrings of household life began. Footsteps echoed against the marble floor as servants hurried to light braziers and lay out fresh linens. Through the half-open door, Evelina glimpsed old Mrs. Penrose, the housekeeper, whispering to the butler about Agnes and Imogen's extravagant breakfast demands: lavender-scented porridge, candied figs imported from the south coast, and an entire loaf of freshly baked bread for each girl. The sneer in Mrs. Penrose's eyes reminded Evelina that change in the manor was never easy, no matter how deserving. She rose, slipping on her knitted slippers and wrapping the shawl around her like armor. In the corridor's cool silence, she paused before the portrait of Seraphine Hawthorne, painted in oils and displayed above the sweeping staircase. In the painting, her mother's auburn hair tumbled over her shoulders like autumn leaves, and her green eyes held a compassionate kindness. Evelina bowed her head softly. "I will honor you," she whispered. "I will learn your craft and carve out my own path." Descending to the kitchen, she found Clara, once her mother's devoted apprentice, folding a stack of linen napkins with trembling hands. Clara's eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, and Evelina knew that the housekeeper had not dismissed her, as rumors claimed, but instead clung to the manor's familiar routines for fear of upheaval. Evelina approached gently. "Clara, I need your help today." Clara startled but did not flee. "Miss Evelina?" she asked, voice a whisper. "You have your father's permission." Evelina lifted the heart of night, glowing faintly in the shadowy kitchen. "I have something more powerful than his permission. I have the bloom itself." She set the blossom carefully on a folded towel. "Teach me what you can. I must learn to tend this place as my mother once did." Clara's lips quivered. "Very well, my lady." She placed an arm around Evelina's shoulder. "Then let us begin at once. The gardener, Mr. Blackthorn, needs his morning instructions, and he already grumbles about usurping orders." Together they crossed the cobblestone courtyard, dew sparkling on the paving stones. Evelina inhaled deeply, tasting the freshness of spring and the faint tang of composted earth. She spotted Mr. Blackthorn, a burly man with weathered hands and a perpetually furrowed brow, kneeling amid the rose bushes. He looked up as they approached. "Miss Hawthorne," he grunted, wiping sweat from his brow. "I heard tell of midnight wanderings. You'd best not disturb the blooms after dark." His voice held a begrudging respect. "I disturbed them for a reason," Evelina replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "This plant," she gestured toward the heart of night safely wrapped in a linen cloth, "is unique. I need to know how to keep it alive, and how it might help heal this estate and perhaps heal me." Mr. Blackthorn's eyes flickered with curiosity. He rose slowly, brushing soil from his hands. Very well, miss. We start by understanding needs. This is not like your mother's roses, but a creature of moonlight and water. It will need shade in daylight and pure water, no sediments, no channel reruns. I can show you where to gather dew and purify it. Evelina nodded, her throat tight with anticipation. Thank you. Show me everything. Under Mr. Blackthorn's guidance, they moved through the formal rose gardens, past the yew hedges, and into the small walled courtyard at the western wing. There, a marble basin collected rainwater, its surface perfectly still. Blackthorn knelt and dipped his gnarled fingers into the water. See how clear it is. But it collects dust and small debris. We must strain it through silk before it touches the petals. He produced a scrap of mother-of-pearl cloth thin as spider silk. Evelina took it carefully, learning the weight and texture. While Blackthorn tended to the basin, Clara instructed Evelina on soil composition, demonstrating how to mix potting loam with crushed eggshells and charcoal to maintain pH balance. Evelina's fingers, though slender and unpracticed, followed each motion, measuring the soil, crushing the shells into fine fragments, and turning the mixture gently. She realized that magic alone would not keep the heart of night alive. She needed to master the humble art of tending earth. By midday, the shimmer of a low sun made hot the polished stones of the courtyard. Evelina's shawl was damp with sweat, but she persisted, kneeling beside the basin to water the plant, then shielding it with a small parasol to prevent harsh light. A hush settled over the courtyard, broken only by Clara's murmured instruction and Blackthorn's occasionally gruff praise. For a moment, Evelina felt the weight of centuries lift. Here, among these stones and soil, she felt her mother's presence most strongly. Just as Evelina settled the plant back onto its pedestal, a sharp, high-pitched voice shattered the calm. "What are you doing here?" Agnes's voice crackled like shattered glass. Evelina turned to see the elder stepsister looming at the entrance to the courtyard, arms folded over the damask skirt of her day dress. Behind her, Imogen peeked around the corner, her eyes alight with mischief. Evelina rose slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. "I'm tending the heart of night," she answered evenly. "It needs care, and I am the custodian now." Agnes scoffed, stepping forward so the sunlight glinted off the pearls at her throat. "That plant. It's nothing but a pale flower. Mother never possessed such whimsy. She preferred roses that at least showed color." She pointed derisively. "If you spend all your time fussing over a ghost flower, you won't notice when this place truly falls apart." Imogen giggled, advancing to snatch the silk cloth from Evelina's trembling hands. Clara lunged forward, but Mr. Blackthorn blocked her path. "Hands off," he warned, voice low. Agnes glared. "Who's going to stop us?" "The gardener. The cook's ghost." She laughed, but Clara's eyes burned with silent fury. Evelina stepped between them, placing herself protectively before the heart of night. "Leave it be," she said quietly. "This flower matters more than you know." Agnes raised an eyebrow. "And what do you know, Cinderella?" She spat out the nickname as though tasting poison. "You're nothing without your father's money, and soon enough, without him here at all." A cold flush crept up Evelina's throat. She tasted anger and fear in the same bitter sip. But remembering her mother's counsel in those dusty journals to be calm and resolute, she drew a steadying breath. "My name is Evelina Hawthorne," she said, voice firm. "I will not tolerate your cruelty." Agnes's sneer faltered for a heartbeat, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. Then she turned on her heel and stalked away, Imogen trailing behind, casting one last contemptuous glance over her shoulder. As they left, Blackthorn released a breath he'd been holding. "Well done," he grunted. "You hold your own quite well." Clara placed a gentle hand on Evelina's arm. "You've inherited more than just your mother's eyes," she whispered. "You have her spirit." Evelina forced a small smile, though her heart pounded with adrenaline. "Thank you," she said softly. "But I have much to learn and much to prove." Today was only the beginning. Together, the three of them returned to the manor's kitchen, where the scent of roasting meats and freshly baked bread drifted through the door like an unwelcome invitation. Evelina removed her shawl, straightened her back, and prepared to face the next challenge, the demands of her step-family at the breakfast table, and the delicate dance of claiming her rightful place in a home that had become a battlefield of wills. As dawn turned to morning, Evelina realized that healing Ravenswood Manor would not come from a single magic blossom, but from her own growing strength, her ability to withstand cruelty, to learn the old ways of earth and moonlight, and to carry her mother's legacy into the light of day. The heart of night might bloom only under a full moon, but Evelina herself would stand steadfast through every dawn and every trial that rose with the sun. The morning after Evelina's first confrontation in the courtyard, Ravenswood Manor seemed to hold its breath. Word of her defiance spread like wildfire through the staff, the young lady who dared stand between her stepsisters and the rare heart of night. But while some whispered admiration, others bristled at the idea of a daughter unmoored from courtesy. Evelina rose before dawn to tend her precious bloom, but as she crept down the grand staircase, she found the manor's atmosphere charged with an almost tangible tension. In the dim light of the east wing corridor, Clara fell into step beside her. "They'll come for the flower tonight," the older woman murmured, glancing at the shuttered windows. "I fear Agnes and Imogen will not rest until they've destroyed what you hold dear." Evelina swallowed hard. Each full moon brought the blossom into its prime, and tonight, under a silver sky, its petals would open again. To lose it now would break not only the plant but the fragile hope in Evelina's heart. That afternoon, as Evelina learned the art of brewing moonflower tea, a gentle draft that eased sorrow and sharpened the mind, Blackthorn warned her of the heavy storm gathering on the moors. "The wind will howl tonight," he said gravely, wiping mud from his boots. "If the petals are to remain intact, they must be sheltered from every gust. Evelina vowed to reinforce the basin's shelter with willow branches, and she enlisted Clara's help to rig a wooden canopy and drape it in damp linen cloth for extra protection. Despite the preparations, dusk arrived with an electric ferocity. The sky tore open in sheets of rain, and lightning danced across the horizon like spectral fire. Evelina's heart pounded as she paced the courtyard, twisting damp fabric around the stands. Suddenly, a low, mocking laugh echoed from the yew hedge. "Need a hand, Cinderella?" Imogen's voice coiled through the wind. Before Evelina could react, a dark shape darted forward and yanked the linen from the canopy, sending Evelina stumbling into the muddy paving stones. Clara rushed to help her up, but the storm swallowed their protests. In a flash of lightning, Evelina saw Agnes flit across the courtyard, her skirts whipped by the wind, as she raised a heavy cast iron lantern and sent it crashing toward the marble basin. Evelina lunged, but the lantern shattered at impact, cracking the basin's rim and sending cold water sloshing over the edge. The heart of night trembled, Petals slick with rain and frightened by the crash. "No!" Evelina cried, scrambling toward the plant. She reached it just as Imogen, flushed with adrenaline, stamped her foot and sent a surge of muddy water through the basin. Clara cried out, but Evelina clutched the stem, protective as a mother. In the chaos, a bolt of lightning struck the iron gate beyond the hedge, sending a deafening boom through the courtyard. For a moment, father and daughter both froze, Evelina standing with the soaked blossom, Agnes and Imogen cowering behind the hedge, and Clara shielding her face from the driving rain. Then Gregory Hawthorne burst into the courtyard, drenched but resolute, lantern aloft. "Enough!" he roared, his voice competing with the storm's fury. The stepsisters fell silent, shame and fear quickly replacing mockery. Gregory strode to Evelina's side, setting the lantern down and shielding the blossom with his coat. "This ends now," he declared. His gaze, stern yet tinged with sorrow, swept over Agnes and Imogen. "You will not harm what your mother loved, nor what her daughter must protect." Agnes tried to speak, but the words died on her lips. Imogen's shoulders shook with tears she could not hide. Gregory's next words were softer, yet they carried a weight that settled even in the storm's heart. "You will apologize to Evelina at once, and you will help repair what has been broken." He turned to Evelina, voice gentler. "My dear, let us save the heart of night. It still has a chance." Together, father and daughter guided Clara and Blackthorn in righting the basin and mending its crack with a mixture of clay and ground charcoal and improvised sealing paste that would hold until a master mason could replace the stone. Evelina worked with trembling fingers, but each breath of effort steadied her resolve. As they pressed the sealing paste into the fissure, the storm began to abate, as though nature itself acknowledged the triumph of compassion over cruelty. Once the basin stood firm, Blackthorn brushed his sleeve across his brow. "It'll hold for now," he declared. "But the real test comes when the moon rises. We must keep watch." Evelina nodded, her heart still racing. She wrapped the blossom in the damp linen and lifted it into her arms. Agnes and Imogen watched from the doorway, now too shaken to mock. Their eyes held something like regret, though Evelina did not yet trust it. As the household retreated indoors, Gregory offered his daughter a silent arm to lean on. "Come, Evelina," he said softly. "Let us warm by the fire." Inside the great hall, wet footprints and splintered wood marked the intrusion of the storm. Yet when Evelina sank beside her father and warmed her chilled hands, she realized that the bonds formed in crisis were stronger than any theft or sabotage. The heart of night would bloom again, and she would be there to greet it. While the servants dried the courtyard and cleared away broken lantern shards, Evelina and Gregory shared a pot of moonflower tea. Clara brought them ginger biscuits, and for a brief moment, laughter filled the hall, a fragile but radiant promise that even after the blackest thunder, peace could follow. Agnes and Imogen hovered by the doorway, glancing at Evelina with hesitant curiosity. Gregory offered a nod of invitation, "Join us." Imogen stepped forward, voice subdued. I'm sorry," she stammered. Her apology was shaky but sincere, an acknowledgement of guilt. Agnes followed, folding her arms but offering no words. Evelina accepted Imogen's hand first, then looked to Agnes. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I hope we can learn to live in this house as one family." Agnes bowed her head, and though the tension remained, it was tempered now by a fragile truce. That night, as Evelina returned to her chamber, she found a small slip of parchment on her pillow, sealed with black wax. In her candle's glow, she broke the seal and read in elegant spidery script. "To my dearest Evelina. Tonight you proved your courage and your heart. The heart of night stands because of you. But you are not alone. I shall send a letter at first light, for I must attend matters in London longer than I expected. Trust in yourself, and trust in those who stand with you. G." Evelina pressed the note to her chest, feeling her father's unwavering support even across distance. She lay awake long after the candles burned low, plotting how she would tend the bloom until the next full moon, preparing for the challenges yet to come. Outside her window, the battered courtyard lay quiet and cleansed, and in the secret pond, the heart of night pulsed once more with gentle light. Evelina understood now that her quest was about more than mastering herbal lore or surviving step-family strife. It was a journey into her own strength, her capacity for forgiveness, and her willingness to protect what was fragile and precious. As the first gray light of dawn filtered through the trees, she whispered softly to the garden beyond, "I am ready." And with that vow, she drifted into a dreamless sleep, prepared to meet whatever the next chapter would bring. Dawn was still a pale promise when Evelina slipped from her bedchamber and made her way to the library at the heart of Ravenswood Manor. The grand oak doors were slightly ajar, an invitation she could not ignore. The library smelled of aged parchment, beeswax polish, and the faint trace of jasmine tea, the very scent her mother had favored when poring over her journals. Evelina's candle cast dancing shadows across shelves that climbed 2 stories high, each shelf crowded with leather-bound tomes, vellum scrolls, and small wooden boxes locked with tarnished brass clasps. She had not come merely to admire the library's grandeur. Late the previous evening, as she tidied the hearth, she had noticed an odd draft too cold and too deliberate to be natural. Tracing the chill to the base of the leftmost bookcase, Evelina discovered a loose plank in the floor. Heart-pounding, she pressed on it, and with a soft click, the entire bookcase swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Now, torch in hand, Evelina stepped onto the spiral stone steps. Each footfall echoed like a promise through the hidden stairwell. Clara's instruction rang in her ears, "There are places even I have never entered, my lady. Your mother Seraphine told me the chamber was private, reserved for her most sacred studies." Evelina exhaled, steeling herself. Whatever lay at the bottom could hold treasures and dangers far beyond the garden's heart of night. At the base of the stairs, Evelina emerged into a vaulted room lit by slender stained glass windows set high in the walls. Moonlight, though the sky was cloudless, filtered through, casting fractured rainbows over a low wooden table strewn with parchment, dried herbs, and strange crystalline vials that glowed with an inner light. Along the walls, cabinets of ebony wood bore labels in Seraphine's delicate handwriting: elixirs of the starlit veil, dream root infusion, nightshade antidote, and whispers of the elderwood. Evelina's breath caught. Here, in this secret laboratory, her mother had worked beyond the knowledge of any living soul. Here lay the true heart of Seraphine's legacy, not just healing gardens and moonlit blossoms, but alchemical wonders capable of mending mind and body alike. She approached the table, careful not to disturb the fragile arrangements. A heavy leather-bound journal lay open to a page illustrated with silver ink, a diagram of a double helix of moonlight, entwined with tendrils of night-blooming jasmine. Beneath it, Seraphine's script explained how small doses of jasmine extract, when blended with dew collected under the blood moon, could soothe nightmares that plagued the dying. Evelina's fingers trembled as she read. This knowledge could save countless lives. A sudden noise, a muted shuffle, made her whirl around. From the shadows stepped Mr. Blackthorn, his grizzled face drawn in concern. "My lady, forgive my intrusion. I heard the bookcase and feared for your safety." He held a brass lantern, its flame flickering uneasily against the stained glass. "It's all right," Evelina said, her voice hushed. "Father trusted me with this place. He knew I would discover it when the time was right." She crossed to the cabinets and carefully extracted a small vial labeled Essence of Nightingale's Wing. The liquid inside shimmered like liquid pearl. Blackthorn frowned. "That vial is dangerous in untrained hands. Seraphine used it only in dire circumstances." Evelina cradled the vial. "I intend to learn. My mother's craft must not die with her." She turned back to the table, surveying the contents. "There's so much here, so many elixirs and formulas. But I feel overwhelmed. I need guidance." Blackthorn nodded solemnly. "Then we shall begin. You will not rush. Each tincture, each infusion, requires patience and respect." He motioned toward a cabinet further along the wall. "Your mother's manual of lunar remedies start there." I will fetch candles and fresh linen to work on the central bench. As Blackthorn retreated, Evelina's thoughts swirled. 1,000 questions pressed at her mind. Where had Seraphine sourced these ingredients? How had she balanced mortal ethics with arcane power? And most urgent of all, could this chamber's knowledge help her protect the heart of night through the trials ahead? She settled at the bench and opened the Manual of Lunar Remedies. The vellum pages were soft under her fingertips, annotated in the margins with tiny sketches of plants, runic symbols, and coded notes. Evelina spent the next hour carefully reading a section on wardings against malicious intrusion, which described how to weave protective sigils into the linen coverings of rare blooms. This was exactly what she needed, a way to make the heart of night impervious to sabotage. Lost in concentration, Evelina did not hear the library doors open. A clear, melodic voice broke the silence. "I do hope I am not interrupting." She looked up to see Lady Marigold Sinclair, the wealthy widow from the nearby town of Ravens Glen, standing in the archway with her son, Timothy, clutching her skirts. Timothy was pale and thin, his eyes heavy with fever. His arrival at the manor had been unannounced, but rumor said he suffered from a wasting illness no physician could cure. Evelina rose, wiping her hands on a clean cloth. "Lady Marigold, Master Timothy, I did not expect visitors." She glanced at Blackthorn, who appeared behind her, arms folded respectfully. Lady Marigold's face was lined with worry. "I apologize for intruding on your study, Miss Hawthorne, but I have nowhere else to turn." Timothy's cough worsens by the night, and the apothecaries are helpless. "When I heard of the miraculous bloom in your garden, I thought perhaps you could offer some remedy." She looked pleadingly at Evelina. "Even a tincture from your mother's old recipes, anything." Evelina's heart ached at the sight of Timothy's hollow cheeks and glassy eyes. She had studied healing only in theory. Her trials with the heart of night had focused on preserving a plant's life, not mending mortal illness. And yet, this was precisely what Seraphine had done, heal the helpless. A gentle resolve washed over her. "Very well," she said, voice steady. "But we will need to act wisely. Timothy, come forward. There is an infusion here that soothes fevered pulses and eases coughs." With Blackthorn's aid, Evelina selected the ingredients: petals of bluebell, a pinch of crushed dream root, and a drop of dew harvested from the heart of night's basin. As she worked, she explained each step to Lady Marigold in hushed tones, teaching her how to brew the infusion rather than simply handing over a potion. Timothy, propped up on Blackthorn's armchair, watched her intently. When Evelina poured the pale lavender liquid into a delicate glass cup, she felt both excitement and trepidation. "Drink this slowly," she instructed Timothy. "Take small sips every hour, and rest." He obeyed, his trembling fingers curled around the cup. Lady Marigold released a breath she seemed to have held for days. "I cannot thank you enough, Miss Hawthorne." Her eyes shimmered. "You honor your mother's memory." Evelina gave a small, uncertain smile. "I am only beginning to learn." Once the Sinclair party departed, Evelina returned to the secret chamber, filled with a new determination. The practical task of healing a child had awakened something that no garden could, the true purpose of the knowledge she inherited. She had saved Timothy, perhaps, or at least eased his pain. But she knew that true mastery would require many more nights of study and countless trials. Blackthorn closed the heavy library door behind him and placed a gentle hand on Evelina's shoulder. "You did well," he murmured. "Your mother would be proud." Evelina touched the edge of the manual and looked around the chamber, its shelves now alive with promise rather than secrets. The hidden laboratory was no longer a silent mausoleum, it was a living legacy, pulsing with the possibility of new life and new hope. She lifted her candle high, illuminating rows of crystalline vials and leather-bound volumes. "Then let us begin," she said, voice firm. "We have a world to heal." Evelina awoke the morning after Master Timothy's fever broke, feeling as though the manor itself had exhaled in relief. Sunlight slipped through her curtained window and played upon the gilded headboard where she lay. She rose quietly, mindful not to disturb the folded letter from her father, still tucked beneath her pillow. He was in London, tending to affairs of estate and business, but every line he wrote crackled with affection and unwavering faith in her. Today, more than ever, she resolved to be worthy of that trust. Clad in a simple linen dress and her mother's silver pendant, a crescent moon encircled by ivy, Evelina made her way to the courtyard, stopping first at the hidden entrance to the laboratory. The heavy oak bookcase yielded again to her touch, and she descended the spiral steps to find Blackthorn already waiting, lantern in hand. "Good morning," he greeted, voice low. Behind him, two small wooden crates sat braced against the wall, one overflowing with freshly harvested herbs, the other filled with spices and roots that Evelina had yet to catalogue. "Your mother collected these from every corner of her journeys," he said. "Today, we attempt the ward of 12 petals. It will require equal parts of 12 distinct blooms, one of which is, of course, the heart of night." Evelina's heart fluttered at the challenge. She knelt beside the table and opened Seraphine's Manual of Lunar Remedies to the faded page marked with a pressed violet petal. Together, they read the instructions. Each bloom must be plucked at the precise moment its petals trembled with dew, then woven into a circular garland and laid beneath the watchful gaze of the full moon. Only when the petals glowed with a soft internal light would the ward be complete. It was a ritual designed to protect both plant and practitioner from malicious intent, and in the wake of recent sabotage, Evelina realized its necessity. By mid-morning, the pair had compiled a ledger of required flowers: moonlit jasmine, dreamroot blossom, silvery nightshade, pale bluebell, cobalt delphinium, rosewater lily, frost-touched orchid, lavender dewflower, star anise bloom, maiden's tears, ghost orchid, and the crowning heart of night itself. Evelina's pen danced across the page as she assigned gathering duties to Clara and two trusted gardeners. Blackthorn would oversee the more delicate petals, while Evelina prepared the alchemical basin. For the weaving, the estate buzzed with unusual activity. Clara darted through the gardens, her arms full of parchment bundles and leather pouches. Gardeners knelt at flower beads, coaxing blossoms from the earth and tending them gently. Word of Evelina's ritual had spread among the staff, and morale was high. They, too, yearned to see the manor flourish once more. Even Agnes and Imogen ventured outside, hesitant, pale-faced, but curious, each carrying a small basket of blooms. Their awkward, remorseful expressions told Evelina they wished to make amends, though she could not yet trust their motives completely. When twilight softened the sky into dusky rose, Evelina gathered everyone in the walled moon garden. A low stone bench encircled a central basin carved from white marble, ivy climbed its edges, and a slender canopy of willow branches arched overhead. The staff formed a silent ring beyond the hedge, watching as Evelina laid out each bloom on a velvet cloth. The air smelled of damp earth, lavender, and something unamiable, perhaps hope itself. Clara knelt beside Evelina. "Remember to speak the words your mother wrote," she murmured, pointing to a line in the almanac, "By silver petal, by lunar glow, I bind protection gainst friend and foe." Evelina's throat tightened. She had memorized the phrase in secret, but now, with dozens of eyes upon her, younger and older, friend and foe, her confidence wavered. Agnes stepped forward, her basket of nightshade trembling in her arms. "May I place the blooms?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Evelina regarded her stepsister, recalling Agnes's earlier cruelty. But tonight, it seemed, they stood on common ground. Carnations and ivy no longer signaled division but unity. Evelina inclined her head. "You may." One by one, the siblings and gardeners wove the garland around the basin's rim, silvery petals interlacing with cobalt, white with lavender, frost-kissed blooms fluttering beside drops of dewdrop. Petals. Imogen's hands shook as she added maiden's tears. When Evelina gently placed her hand over Imogen's, the younger girl nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. A hush fell as the final petal, the heart of night, still wrapped in its damp linen, was placed at the garland's center. Evelina stood, raising her arms as Clara recited the incantation. "By silver petal, by lunar glow, I bind protection gainst friend and foe. Shade of night and light of moon, keep safe our hearts till dawn comes soon." A soft stirring ran through the garland. Each petal shimmered, a faint hum rose from the basin, echoing the gentle heartbeat of the heart of night itself. The willow canopy swayed, though no breeze stirred. Lamps of moonlight reflected through the stained glass above, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across every face. Evelina exhaled in wonder. The ward held. She reached into the basin, touching the water's surface. It lapped at her fingertips like gentle silk. At that moment, the distant tolling of the manor's bell signaled midnight, and as the final chime echoed, the heart of night unfolded one radiant silver petal. Its glow spread, bathing the garden in a soft, protective light. But even as relief washed over her, Evelina's senses prickled with foreboding. A rustle among the hedges alerted her. A figure slunk into the moonlight, dark robes swirling. For an instant, she thought it must be Blackthorn returning, but the face that stepped forward was unfamiliar, lean, angular, eyes glinting with malice. "Impressive display," a voice hissed. "But you bind nothing here. Your petty ward means nothing to those who walk between worlds." Evelina's blood ran cold. The intruder reached out, and a shadow slithered from the robe's coffin obsidian thistle, its petals black as spilled ink. Thrown into the garland, it clattered against the marble and sank silently, polluting the sacred circle. Clara gasped. Blackthorn moved to seize the intruder, but the figure vanished in a swirl of mist, leaving only a single black thistle floating among the silver petals. The ward flickered, its hum faltering. Evelina leapt forward, relieving the thistle from the basin. Its surface blackened upon contact, sending ripples of darkness through the water. She crushed the thistle between her fingers, feeling its poison pulse into her skin. Pain flared in her mind, a dark whisper promising despair. "Hold fast," Evelina called, fumbling for the vial of jasmine infusion she had prepared earlier. She uncorked it and poured the clear liquid into the basin, watching as it swirled with ink-black ripples. The jasmine's gentle scent fought back the poison's tang, and after a heartbeat too long, the basin stilled, the silver glow returned, steadier than before. Agnes and Imogen rushed to Evelina's side, helping her steady the basin's rim. Blackthorn had already set about sweeping away thistle fragments and anointing the warded boundary with protective runes. As the moon reached its apex, the garland hummed once more, a reaffirmation of the ward's strength and Evelina's growing mastery. Silence reigned as the staff stared at the basin. Evelina's heart pounded, but she held her head high. "Darkness cannot withstand light," she said softly. "Together, we protect what matters." In the aftermath, Agnes hesitated, then pressed a hand to Evelina's arm. "Thank you," she whispered. I am sorry I ever doubted you." Imogen echoed her apology, voice thick with emotion. Evelina gave a small, brave smile. "We all have much to learn," she replied. "But tonight, we proved we can stand as one." High above, the heart of night pulsed gently, its silver light drifting across the wagons of lavender and moonflower that would revive the manor's gardens in coming days. As dawn's first rosy rays brushed the horizon, Evelina felt a warmth that had nothing to do with sunlight. The ward held, the alliance forged, and her mother's legacy burned brighter than any shadow the world could cast. A day passed since the midnight intrusion, just long enough for the household to settle into a tense quiet, like the breath drawn before a storm. Though the ward still held and the heart of night pulsed with faint silver light, Evelina knew that peace was fragile, and protection incomplete. The mysterious figure's words haunted her dreams, "You find nothing here," echoes of something old. Something deeper than mere sabotage. She awoke before dawn, a curl of cold air wrapping her feet as she stepped out of bed. A strange heaviness pressed on her chest. Clara, ever dutiful, had left a note upon her bedside table. The post arrived early. "There is a letter from your father. It is unlike the others. I did not open it." That alone was enough to make Evelina hurry down the spiral stair with her shawl barely clinging to her shoulders. In the drawing room, near the hearth where logs still smoldered, lay a sealed envelope marked with a crest she had never seen before. It was not her father's usual seal of House Hawthorne, but something older, circular, made of interlocking ivy leaves and a serpent swallowing its tail. A ring of dusk-colored wax held it closed. Evelina cracked the seal and unfolded the parchment. The ink was faded, the handwriting trembling. It was indeed from her father, but it spoke in riddles. My dearest starling, if you are reading this, then the veil has already thinned. Know this, the gardens we tend are not rooted solely in soil. The ward was only the first doorway. Behind it waits the ashen path, and what sleeps there must not be stirred. Do not trust what speaks in moonlight but casts no shadow. Do not accept aid without knowing its price. And should the path open, seal it before it breathes again. Forgive me for not telling you everything. I had hoped to keep this burden from your shoulders. You are braver than I ever was. G. Evelina read the letter again, then a third time, the words sinking deeper into her bones like winter frost. The ashen path. A hidden world beneath their own. A place her father had tried to guard her from. She didn't have long to wonder. By midday, Mr. Blackthorn called for her in the garden with uncharacteristic urgency. The earth is changing, he said, pointing toward a patch of ground beneath the oldest willow. It's warm, despite no sunlight. The roots have shifted. I've seen this once before, long ago, before you were born. Together they dug beneath the tree. The soil was unnaturally soft, and steam rose from beneath the roots. Barely a foot deep, they found it, a slab of stone, etched with markings that pulsed faintly in Evelina's presence. Her touch seemed to activate something. A low hum, almost like breathing. It's awakening, Blackthorn murmured. The ashen path. What lies beneath it? Evelina asked, voice barely audible. Passageways. Chambers. Wards. And things we were never meant to uncover. He turned to her. Your mother sealed this place after something escaped. She told me it wasn't dead but dreaming. Evelina's hands clenched. She glanced back at the manor. The memory of the cloaked intruder, of the black thistle, came rushing back. Whoever that was, they knew about the path. They had likely come to unseal it. That night, Clara brought Evelina another piece of parchment. It had not arrived with the post. It had simply appeared on her writing desk. There was no signature. Only a message written in charcoal. You are too late. The thorns have already rooted. The bloom will not save you now. Follow the breath of the soil, and you will find the truth. For the first time in many days, Evelina felt the taste of true fear. Not for herself, but for what she might be forced to awaken. She summoned Agnes and Imogen into the drawing room. I need your help, she said bluntly, laying the first letter from her father upon the table. Whatever lies beneath the willow, my father feared it. My mother sealed it. but something is trying to break through. Agnes frowned. You think that figure in the garden came from underground? I think he came from somewhere older than that, Evelina replied. Somewhere buried, yes. But not forgotten. And he's not alone. Imogen's usual flippant demeanor faltered. What do you want us to do? Help me gather the tools to enter the lower crypts, Evelina said. We'll follow the old passage beneath the garden wall. It connects to the catacombs under the western wing. Agnes crossed her arms. And if we find something that can't be sealed again? Evelina's gaze did not waver. Then we don't let it escape. That night, as the wind howled and lanterns flickered along the walls, Evelina descended into the western catacombs with a map drawn in her mother's hand. The cold was immediate, clawing at her arms even through the thick wool of her traveling cloak. Clara had packed her a small satchel, matches, a vial of dream root tonic, a small blade carved with lunar runes. She lit a lantern and pressed forward. The passage wound down and down, past walls etched in ivy-shaped relief, past the tombs of long-dead hawthorns whose names had long since faded from history. The deeper she went, the less sound followed her. Her footsteps vanished. Her breath felt distant. Even her thoughts seemed muffled. And then she heard it. Breathing. Not her own. Not human. A deep, rhythmic exhale from somewhere just beyond the far wall, behind a sealed archway covered in vines, real, living vines that pulsed in time with the breath. The ashen path was awake. Evelina took one step closer and the vines shivered. In the lantern's flickering light, she saw something etched just above the archway in old tongue, barely legible. To breathe here is to borrow time. She backed away slowly, heart hammering. The danger wasn't in opening the door. It was in the fact that something behind it had already begun to open it from the other side. She turned and ran. Not in fear, but in purpose. Because if the ashen path had begun to stir, then the heart of night wasn't a cure. It was a warning. A first light in the darkness. And Evelina Hawthorne was no longer just the girl who tended the garden. She was now its guardian. And the veil between peace and peril was thinner than ever. The following day, the skies above Ravenswood Manor were a grim stretch of grey, thick with clouds that loomed like smoke above the high gables and weeping willows. Rain had not yet come, but the stillness in the air made Evelina's skin prickle as if even the birds had chosen silence. She sat at the edge of the greenhouse, where old panes of glass filtered the light into a muted green gloom. Before her, the heart of night stood in its protected pot, swaying gently despite the absence of breeze. She leaned closer and whispered, "You were never just a flower, were you?" Its petals, half opened from the previous moonlight ritual, did not respond. But a faint warmth radiated from its center, as if some quiet energy still stirred within. A knock at the greenhouse door startled her. Agnes entered, not with her usual poise, but with dirt-stained gloves and a trowel tucked into her belt. Imagines checking the old stairwell. I brought the scrolls you requested. They were hidden under the sewing room floorboards. She placed a bundle of weathered scrolls on the nearby work table. Evelina untied the twine and unrolled them carefully. Maps, formulas, star charts, and pages covered in Seraphine's elegant script. The first words she saw made her breath catch. The roots run deeper than the foundation. When you feel the ground breathe, the seal is already breaking. Evelina shuddered. That was exactly what she had experienced beneath the willow tree, living vines that pulsed with a breath not her own, an unnatural stillness broken only by the whisper of something old and buried. And now, her mother's words confirmed it. Agnes hovered. Do you believe what she wrote? That the manor was built over some kind of ancient passage? I believe we were never meant to find it, Evelina replied, still scanning the scrolls. But someone else already has. She tapped a star chart at the bottom of one page, 3 symbols surrounded by a crescent moon and a coiling vine. These markings were etched into the door I saw below, she said quietly. That door wasn't just buried. It was locked with intent. And these symbols are part of the lock. Blackthorn arrived minutes later, rain spattering across his coat as he entered. I've traced the oldest stones, he reported, pulling off his gloves. There's a fault line beneath the western crypt. An unnatural shift. Something's shifting beneath the manor earth, or something else. Then we don't have time, Evelina said. She looked at Agnes. You said Imogen was exploring the stairwell. Yes, Agnes replied. She volunteered, actually. Evelina gave a slow nod. Then we meet her there. I need to see if the 3 of us together can reactivate the warding runes. My mother didn't work alone. These rituals were designed for a circle of 3. Agnes blinked. You're saying we have to work magic together? No, Evelina said. Not magic. Harmony. Intention. That's what binds the ward. Together, they descended into the catacombs again. This time, Evelina carried more than her lantern. She bore the heart of night itself, cradled in a sealed glass orb woven with protective runes. The plant pulsed faintly, its light dancing on the walls like fireflies. They reached the archway again, where the vines still pulsed like veins under the skin of the earth. Imogen waited, crouched beside a small brazier she had lit. Her cheeks were smudged with ash. I saw something move behind the vines, she whispered. But it didn't come closer. Evelina laid the orb containing the heart of night on the center of the floor and drew 3 interlocking circles around it with chalk soaked in moonflower oil. Take your place, she said. Hands on the circle. When I speak, echo the words. Together, The three girls knelt around the orb. Evelina began. By blood not bound, but choice declared. By light that burns though none have dared. We bind the path, we still the breath. We hold the line, defying death. Agnes and Imogen echoed the words, shakily at first, then stronger. The vines twitched. The runes above the arch flared. And then the seal cracked. A narrow slit opened down the center of the stone, like an eyelid parting. From within came a thin tendril of shadow, reaching. But it stopped just before the orb. The heart of night's glow intensified, casting beams of silver light through the chamber. The tendril recoiled. Evelina poured the last of her dream root tonic into the groove of the circle, and whispered the final line. You may speak, but you shall not pass. There was a long, hollow silence. Then the vines withdrew. The slit closed. The pulse faded. It was not a full banishment, but it was a warning, returned in kind. Whatever had awakened beneath them now knew its enemies had found their strength. The girls exhaled in unison. They sat back in the dust, eyes wide with fear and wonder. We did it, Imogen said, breaking the silence. We actually did it? Evelina nodded slowly. We slowed it. But it's not over. The ashen path isn't just a crypt. It's a prison. And something inside is testing the locks. Agnes's brow furrowed. Then what do we do now? We prepare, Evelina said. We study the scrolls. We gather allies. And we make sure that when the seal fails again, because it will, we are ready to face whatever comes through. As they climbed back toward the surface, Evelina paused at the archway and laid her palm flat against the cold stone. From the other side, there was no sound. But she could feel the presence waiting. A presence that had tasted breath for the first time in centuries and would not forget the touch of her voice. When they returned to the garden, the wind had picked up. The rain finally began to fall. The heart of night, safely restored to its pedestal, glowed quietly beneath its protective dome. And above them, in the highest tower of Ravenswood Manor, a window that had not opened in 100 years creaked ajar. Something stirred within. Watching. Listening. And waiting. The rain fell all through the night and into the next day, soft at first, then heavy as though the skies mourned something lost beneath the soil. In the western wing of Ravenswood Manor, the fire in Evelina's study burned low, crackling gently as she sat hunched over a table scattered with scrolls, star maps, and old alchemical texts. Her fingers were stained with ink and crushed herbs. Her eyes, rimmed with sleepless shadows, stayed fixed on the central illustration of a three-ring seal labeled in her mother's hand, Chamber of Three Echoes. She whispered the name aloud. It was referenced across 5 separate scrolls, a convergence point of energy beneath the manor, hidden deeper than the ashen path and only accessible during what Seraphin called the trine. Alignment, a rare celestial event when three moons, real, mirrored, and veiled, align across the spiritual plane. According to Seraphine's notes, the chamber acted as a conduit between worlds, a last line of defense should the wards of the Ashen Path ever weaken. And now, Evelina feared, that moment was drawing near. Imogen entered quietly, a steaming cup of elderberry tea in her hands. "You've been at it all night," she said, her voice soft. "You should rest." "I can't," Evelina replied, not looking up. There's a pattern in her writing. 3 wards. 3 guardians. 3 echoes. It wasn't just poetry. It was structure. Ritual. She tapped the map. "We already opened 1 ward to repel the shadow. That was the first echo. We need to trigger the second before the seal deteriorates." Agnes, who had fallen asleep near the hearth with her boots still on, stirred at those words. "And how do we find it?" Evelina unrolled a parchment sketch of the manor's understructure, drawn by Seraphine in red and silver ink. "The second echo chamber is hidden below the northern greenhouse, disguised as a root cellar. But it's only accessible with 3 keys, 1 metal, 1 memory, and 1 marked in blood." Agnes raised an eyebrow. "That sounds unnecessarily poetic." "It's old magic," Evelina said. "Literal and symbolic. The metal key is likely physical, a mechanism. The memory key is trickier. It might be an object imbued with emotional resonance, something of significance tied to this place. The blood key," she paused, "requires a hawthorn's touch." "Yours," Imogen said. Evelina nodded solemnly. Before noon, the 3 of them set out to find the keys. Blackthorn had already unlocked the greenhouse and cleared away the vines concealing the cellar hatch. Beneath a shelf of wintering succulents, the hatch creaked open, revealing stone steps winding into damp darkness. The metal key was found surprisingly quickly embedded within the pedestal of a dormant sundial in the central garden, which Blackthorn had always said looked like it wanted to do something more than tell time. Evelina twisted the bronze disc, and with a click, the hidden compartment opened, revealing a narrow, cold iron key shaped like a crescent moon. The second key, memory, was more elusive. Back inside, Evelina wandered the manor's halls, fingers trailing along faded wallpaper and carved moldings, searching for something that felt. Finally, she stopped before the tapestry in the east wing hallway, a depiction of her parents' wedding beneath the moon garden arch. In the background stood a table, and upon it, a small, unremarkable silver comb. She rushed to the attic, where old bridal things were stored. After an hour of rummaging, she found it. The same silver comb engraved with ivy and moon symbols. When she touched it, a strange warmth passed into her palm, and the comb glowed faintly, a flicker of soft white light pulsing at its edge. The final key, the blood key, was the simplest, and most difficult. Evelina returned to the greenhouse, where the others waited, and pressed a small ceremonial dagger, wrapped in linen and anointed in moonflower oil, to her palm. A single drop of blood fell onto the iron key and the silver comb. The three items began to hum. The hatch opened fully. They descended. The passage led not to another crypt, but to a stone chamber unlike any they'd seen, rounded walls inscribed with a flowing script that pulsed softly with light. In the center stood a raised platform and three pillars surrounding it. Evelina stepped forward and felt the pressure shift like stepping into a heartbeat. The chamber knew her. "I think this is the second seal," she whispered. Inscribed on the central platform were three verses. "Let metal test the strength of bond. Let memory reveal what lies beyond. Let blood declare the will to stand. And silence hold the speaking hand." Agnes placed the iron key into a slot on the left pillar. It sank with a gentle click. Imogen laid the silver comb onto the second pillar. A warm glow enveloped it, and the comb dissolved into light, absorbed into the stone. Evelina stepped to the third. A small bowl had risen from the surface. She extended her hand over it, letting a few drops of blood fall into the bowl. The chamber responded. All around them, the script on the walls began to shimmer. A tone, not sound, but vibration, rose from the floor, resonating in their bones. The platform at the center began to rotate slowly, and a symbol formed above it, three circles interlinked by a vertical flame. And then the visions came. Each girl froze as a pulse of light enveloped her eyes, not blinding, but immersive. Evelina saw her mother standing in this very chamber, flanked by two others, a man in a deep green cloak, and a woman with golden hair braided with starlight. They stood in a triangle, their hands joined over a flame that refused to burn. Agnes saw a child, alone in a vast hall, reaching for a door she could never open. Imogen saw herself crying beside a cradle, though no baby lay inside. And then it was gone. The light dimmed. The humming ceased. In the center of the chamber, where there had been only stone, now arose a single object, a crystal vial filled with dark silver liquid. Evelina approached and picked it up. Etched on its glass, "To seal the third, you must unseal the first." Her heart dropped. Agnes stepped forward. "Does that mean?" "Yes," Evelina whispered. "To protect what lies ahead, we'll have to reopen the ashen path." The second echo had sounded. The third and final was waiting. The vial sat on the mantle like a challenge, carved in crystal dark silver, swirling beneath the etched warning, "To seal the third, you must unseal the first." Evelina stood before it in silence, her fingers hovering just inches from the glass. It pulsed faintly, as if aware of the air around it, of the storm gathering both above and beneath the manor. Outside, thunder rumbled across the moors, but inside Ravenswood, the air was still. Unnaturally still. Behind her, Agnes paced. Imogen sat on the floor, back pressed to the wall, turning a small coin between her fingers. It was a habit Evelina had come to recognize, something she did when afraid. No one said it aloud, but they all knew, the final chamber couldn't be sealed unless the ashen path was opened again. The very place they had fought to keep shut. The place something ancient still breathed. "We'll need protection," Evelina said at last, voice steady. "This time, we don't just reinforce a barrier, we step into its domain." Agnes stopped pacing. "Are you serious? You want to go into the ashen path?" Evelina turned. "We have no choice." The Chamber of Three Echoes required a sacrifice to open. The third chamber may demand more than that. If we wait, we'll lose our chance to contain it forever. Imogen looked up, eyes pale in the firelight. "And what if what's inside isn't waiting to be sealed?" she whispered. "What if it's waiting for us?" Evelina didn't answer. She couldn't. Instead, she retrieved her mother's grimoire and opened it to the section marked with a blood-red ribbon, Descending Rituals. There, inscribed in spidery ink, were the words she dreaded and needed. The descent of lantern flame. For those who would enter darkness and return, their light must be borrowed, not owned. She read aloud. 3 flames must be taken, 1 from the hearth of memory, 1 from the breath of truth, and 1 from the wound that dares to remain unhealed. When lit in unison, the lantern may pass into the place where names are forgotten, and light has no language. Clara entered quietly, her apron dusted with ash and herbs. "The lantern's ready," she said, holding out an iron frame, old, dented, and clearly handmade. "Your mother used it once, in the final winter before she passed. She told me it wasn't a light to see with. It was a light to remember with." Evelina accepted it reverently. That night, they began gathering the flames. The first from the hearth of memory came from the eastern drawing room, where Gregory Hawthorne had once read Evelina bedtime stories beside her mother. The fireplace hadn't been lit in years. As Evelina knelt to strike the tinderbox, her fingers trembled not from cold, but remembrance. She lit the kindling, and a soft orange glow spread across the stones. She whispered her mother's name and captured a flickering piece of flame into a small crystal phial. The second from the breath of truth took longer. It came from the western garden at dawn, where dew gathered like tears upon the thorned vines. Evelina, barefoot and shivering, stood before the statue of her ancestor, the first Hawthorne healer, whose stone hands cradled a copper bowl. Clara said the bowl had never been filled. Until now. Evelina spoke aloud, "I will not be what they fear. I will be what they forgot to hope for." The breath of truth drifted from her lips, visible in the morning chill, and as it passed over the bowl, a thin, luminous spark ignited within. It danced like a flame without fire, and Evelina caught it in the second phial. The third, the wound unhealed, was the hardest. Evelina descended alone into the cellar beneath the tower where her mother had once locked herself during her final days. The room was undisturbed, dust settled over every bottle, every scroll. and in the center of the room, her mother's mirror stood, still draped in cloth. Evelina pulled it free. For the first time in years, she looked at herself not as a daughter or healer, but as the one who would walk into the dark alone. Her reflection shimmered, then fractured. Behind her, in the mirror's depths, stood her mother. Not a ghost. Not a figment. But a memory so powerful it breathed. "Are you ready?" Seraphine whispered. "It is not courage that enters the dark, it is love." Tears ran down Evelina's cheeks. "I'm afraid." "As you should be," said the reflection. "But fear is not failure." Evelina reached forward and touched the mirror. A pain sharp as iron lanced through her palm, blood smeared across the glass. And within the wound, a spark ignited. The third flame. They met again at midnight. 3 files. 1 lantern. As Evelina poured them in, the lantern hissed softly, then glowed not yellow or orange, but silver blue. A light without warmth. A memory given shape. They descended once more to the ashen path. This time, the vines parted before them. The seal had been waiting. The door opened. And what lay beyond was not a crypt, nor a passage. It was a hall. Vast. Endless. Lit by no flame, but full of whispering light. They stepped forward. Agnes gripped Imogen's hand. Evelina raised the lantern. And the shadows turned to face them. Not monsters. Not wraiths. But people. Or the memories of people. Their forms were semi-translucent, eyes glowing faintly, mouths moving without sound. At their center stood a figure in a long black cloak. The same one who had thrown the black thistle into the ward. But now, he removed his hood. And the face beneath it was Gregory Hawthorne, Evelina's father. But older. Broken. And speaking without words. The lantern flared. And then everything went still. Evelina fell to her knees. Because she now understood, the seal was not to keep monsters in. It was to keep time from breaking. And her father had already crossed the line. Evelina could not move. The silver lantern in her hand dimmed, its flame quivering like a frightened animal, reflecting her own disbelief. Across the endless stone hall that pulsed with soft light and memory, the figure who had haunted their nights, sabotaged their wards, and cast shadows across their path, now stood revealed. It was her father. Or rather, a version of him. Gregory Hawthorne, his face older, carved by grief, his eyes hollow and rimmed with ash. The cloak that once hid him now hung like a mourning shroud over his thin frame. And when his mouth moved again, the words remained silent, though their meaning thundered inside Evelina's mind like a drum beat wrapped in sorrow. "I came to stop it. But I stayed too long. Agnes gripped Evelina's shoulder. This can't be real. He's in London. He sent the letters. We read them. Imogen's voice cracked. What if that wasn't him anymore? The figure, this ghost of Gregory, raised his hand. The memory shadows behind him shifted. Some vanished like smoke. Others merged into the stone itself. The walls trembled as if they breathed. Time inside the ashen path didn't flow, it coiled. I crossed the seal, came the next silent echo from Gregory's mind. To find what Seraphine warned me about. To protect you from it. Evelina took a step forward. And you became trapped. His expression changed, an echo of a smile, sorrowful and brittle. He reached toward the lantern. It flared as his fingers neared, but he stopped short. You must not stay here long. This place remembers too well. It forgets to let go. Behind him, the chamber revealed more of itself. Not a single hallway, but a circular chamber with 12 archways branching outward like the petals of a broken clock. Each one bore a symbol, a moon, a hand, a broken chain, an eye sewn shut. But the 12th, it was blank. Its surface rippled like water held still in glass. Evelina's breath caught. That one leads to the third chamber, Gregory said, not aloud, but within her. How do you know? She whispered. Because I saw it open, he answered. And I watched myself walk through. But I never returned. Agnes took a sharp breath. You mean, we're looking at a memory that hasn't happened yet? Or one that's always been happening, Imogen added, voice barely a whisper. Evelina stared at the 12th archway. It shimmered with a soft pulse like the heart of night blooming in still water. This was the final seal. The last of the 3 echoes. But it could only be reached by walking through what had already become unmade. What is in there? Evelina asked. Gregory's form flickered. It is not a thing. It is a choosing. It tests what you fear, what you love, what you would give away to stop the breaking. The heart of night is only the first key. The second, he faltered, is you. She felt it then deep in her bones. The final seal would not open with blood or flame. It required something else. A willingness to surrender everything she thought she was. Gregory turned to Agnes and Imogen. You cannot follow her. Agnes stepped forward defiantly. We've come this far. We don't leave her. You're not leaving her, he said softly. You're protecting her exit. Evelina looked between them. He's right. This is mine. And, it's time. Imogen's eyes shimmered with tears, but she nodded. "We'll be right here. We'll hold the door." Evelina approached the 12th arch. The lantern in her hand brightened and suddenly extinguished. The path ahead plunged into shadow. She stepped through. The world beyond the archway was neither cold nor warm, light nor dark. It was feeling. Shapes moved like dreams around her, memories given form, emotions drifting through air like scent. She walked across a floor she could not see, toward a pulsing light ahead. Then the whispers began. First her mother's voice. "Will you forget me if it means saving them?" Then her father. "Will you lose me again if it keeps the seal shut?" Then her own voice. "What if I'm not enough?" She fell to her knees. The chamber of the third echo wasn't made of stone. It was built from doubt. From everything Evelina had buried to survive. From every fear she hadn't dared to name. And at its center, a mirror. Not like the one in the tower. This one was made of liquid memory, and it reflected her as she could become or as she might have been. In the surface danced flickers, a younger Evelina never touched by sorrow, one who had run away instead of stayed. One who became cruel. One who turned her back on the heart of night and let the manor fall. They stared at her, silently accusing. She stood and reached toward the glass. Her hand passed through. And when it emerged, she held something, not a flower, not a flame, but a seed. The final key. The seed of ending. A voice behind her spoke, not from her parents, not from the chamber, but from the seal itself. Would you give this up, knowing you cannot plant it again? She closed her hand around it. I will. If it keeps them safe. The chamber cracked. The mirror shattered into dust. And the archway behind her flared open with a blast of white light. She stepped through. On the other side, Agnes and Imogen gasped as Evelina emerged, cradling the seed. Gregory's figure stood tall once more, his eyes full of something that looked like peace. "You've done what we could not," he said. She nodded, exhausted. "But there's one thing left." She approached the stone dais at the center of the chamber. Upon it, 3 circles awaited. One for the flower. One for the flame. And one for the seed. She placed them each. The runes around the walls blazed. And the chamber began to collapse, not in ruin, but in retreat. The ashen path was sealing itself. For the last time, Gregory's form began to fade. He smiled at her. "Thank you, Starling." And then he was gone. Evelina sank to her knees. Agnes and Imogen rushed forward, embracing her, holding her steady. And far above them, in the garden where the heart of night still bloomed. The petals shimmered gold for the first time. The third echo had been answered. The path was closed. And the light, at last, had spoken. The dawn that broke over Ravenswood Manor was unlike any Evelina had ever known. The sky was streaked not just with rose and gold, but with something softer like light filtering through memory. The rain had passed, and in its wake, the garden shimmered with dew, every blade of grass catching the morning like it had waited centuries for this very light. Evelina stood beneath the arbor, the heart of night cradled in her hands. It was no longer the trembling, fragile bloom she had once rescued in secret. It had changed. The petals had turned from soft silver to radiant gold at the edges, as though kissed by firelight and moonlight both. It pulsed faintly, not just with magic, but with purpose. Behind her, Agnes and Imogen approached in silence. Neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't tense, it was reverent. Agnes, now free of her practiced indifference, knelt by a row of freshly planted moonflowers. "Is it over?" she asked. Evelina turned to her slowly. "The seal is closed. The echoes are answered. The chamber, gone." She looked down at the flower. "But what we've started here, it's just the beginning." Clara joined them from the greenhouse, her apron stained with morning soil. "The soil has shifted," she said gently. "The roots go deeper now. As if the land remembers the battle that was fought beneath it." Blackthorn arrived next, carrying a bundle of fresh-cut herbs. "And the path is sealed?" he asked. Evelina nodded. "Yes. My father's memory helped guide it closed. Whatever dwelled beneath the ashen path can no longer breach this world." Blackthorn grunted approvingly. "Then it's time we breathe again." But even as she spoke the words, Evelina knew something deeper lingered. The seal had been reforged, yes, but the cost remained. She had walked the path where time forgets its name. She had faced her own reflection in a chamber that tested not strength, but resolve. And she had brought back something more than the seed or the bloom. She had brought back understanding. As the morning unfolded, villagers began arriving at the manor gates. It was subtle at first, just a baker's boy delivering too many loaves, a seamstress who brought extra thread, then, a mother with a child in her arms, pale, wheezing, in need of breath that did not rasp. Evelina welcomed them all. She began tending again, not just to petals and roots, but to people. With Clara and Blackthorn at her side, she brewed tinctures. Agnes helped organize the storerooms, and Imogen, once so adrift, read bedtime stories to children whose mothers had walked miles through the mist. The heart of night sat in the greenhouse open, brilliant, never wilting. Its petals responded to need, not time. Whenever someone entered seeking help, the bloom shifted, subtly glowing brighter, guiding Evelina's hands. One night, Evelina sat beneath the stars, the sealed grimoire of her mother beside her, now closed for the first time in weeks. She looked up at the moon and whispered, "Mother, you walked this path before me. Father, you walked it to protect me. I walked it to remember who I am." And as if in reply, the wind stirred the vines gently, and a shimmer of golden pollen drifted down around her shoulders like a blessing. Weeks passed. And then one day, an envelope arrived. No wax seal. No return address. Inside, a single page, handwritten in her father's familiar scrawl. "The veil holds. But not forever. The world will forget what you remembered. Guard the garden. Keep the bloom. Speak the names when others forget them. You were never just a gardener. You were the gate." Evelina folded the letter and placed it in a wooden box on her windowsill, beside the last of Seraphine's moon water tinctures. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Because something in her had changed. She wasn't afraid anymore. Ravenswood had been built on soil, yes, but also on memory, on legacy, on magic threaded between stones and stories. And now, it had a new guardian. That evening, as the last rays of sun touched the edge of the horizon, the heart of night did something it had never done before. It bloomed fully. 12 petals. One for each path beneath the manor. One for each echo answered. One for the seed that had never needed planting because it had already grown in her. Evelina stood at the window, watching as light spilled through the trees. And for the first time since this all began, she allowed herself to smile. The seal was closed. The path was known. The light was hers. A soft wind stirred through Ravenswood Manor as autumn edged toward winter. The leaves turned to gold and rust, mirroring the golden tips of the heart of night's petals now in permanent bloom at the center of the greenhouse. Though the ashen path was sealed, life had not returned to what it once was. It had evolved, deepened, quieted. The land was listening now, and Evelina had become its voice. She moved through the halls like a different kind of ghost, one alive with memory. Each footstep echoed not emptiness but intention. With every room she passed, every drawer she opened, every corner of the garden she touched, she rediscovered pieces of her mother's long-hidden legacy. The manor had begun revealing things to her. Letters tucked into hidden panels behind picture frames. Dried herbs that had long since lost their color but not their power. A pendant of woven silver and green stone that pulsed gently when held beneath moonlight. And with these discoveries came visitors. Not the villagers this time but others. Travelers cloaked in silence. Wanderers who didn't knock but appeared as if summoned. They came asking questions Evelina hadn't spoken aloud. Is this the place where the veil once cracked? Do you still guard the third echo? Is it true that the path speaks in dreams? Evelina gave them tea, never answers. Some she turned away with kindness. A few she allowed to stay the night. And one, a woman named Lyria with hair the color of old parchment, she let into the garden at dusk. "You carry echoes," Evelina told her. Lyria nodded. "And you carry light that remembers what time wants to forget." In exchange for a single drop of silver dew from the heart of night, Lyria left Evelina a gift, a sealed vial labeled Language of Lost Roots. Seraphine had once mentioned it in her notes, a potion that allowed a person to understand not just words but meanings too ancient for tongues. Evelina kept it hidden. For later. For when the next ripple came. Because the world may have forgotten the danger below, but she had not. One evening, Agnes approached her at the edge of the orchard, where the trees bent low with late fruit. "They've started writing to you," she said, handing Evelina a stack of sealed envelopes. "From other manors. Even from the capital." Evelina flipped through the letters. Some were written in haste, others in fear. One bore the royal crest. "They're asking for healers," Agnes continued. "For people who can mend things deeper than flesh. I think they know something stirred this autumn." Evelina tucked the letters beneath her arm. "Then maybe the echoes reach farther than we knew." Agnes hesitated. "Will you leave Ravenswood?" Evelina smiled faintly. "No. But the Petals will." The days that followed became quiet rituals. Clara helped Evelina prepare vials of tinctures made from the heart of night's dew, mixed with staranus root and frost mint. Imogen designed small scrolls to accompany them, symbols of warding, protection, remembrance. Each package was sent to a different corner of the realm. They called them echo petals. Not cures. Not weapons. Just reminders. That light still existed. That someone remembered. That the gate had held. One morning, Evelina awoke from a dream not with fear but with a name. It was not a name from her family. Not from any text. Just a whisper, Baileys. She wrote it down. Days later, in the western greenhouse, she found a stone beneath the soil with that same name carved into it. Just the word, and beneath it, he watched. He waited. He almost came through. It wasn't over. The seals held. But so did the memory of what pressed against them. Evelina called Agnes and Imogen to the great hall that evening. "I need your help again," she said. Imogen smiled. "Another ghost." Agnes crossed her arms. "Another war." Evelina shook her head. "No. A garden." They followed her out into the meadow beyond the manor, where wildflowers had begun to grow in strange patterns. She marked a wide circle in the grass with powdered ash and moon salt. "We're going to plant a second heart," Evelina said. Clara arrived moments later with a clay jar inside, a cutting from the original bloom, already trembling with life. "Is it safe?" Agnes asked. Evelina nodded. "It's not about safety anymore. It's about legacy." Together, they planted the cutting. They watered it with dew, sang over it with ancient lullabies, and whispered names of those forgotten: Seraphine, Gregory, Timothy, Lyria, and even Veles. That night, as the moon rose high, the cutting stirred and bloomed. Only a single petal, but golden from the start. It shimmered like a promise. Evelina stood back, watching it with a breathless kind of awe. "We're not just healers," she said softly. "We're keepers." Agnes placed a hand on her shoulder. "Of what?" Evelina looked up at the sky, then back to the bloom. "Of what others forget to believe in." The garden grew. So did the legend. And though no one else would ever walk the ashen path again, its story echoed through Ravenswood in every whisper of wind, every flicker of moonlight, every petal that dared bloom in the dark. Evelina Hawthorne had become more than guardian, more than girl, more than memory. She was now something older, something rooted, something eternal. She was the keeper of the third echo. And her garden would never sleep again. Winter crept gently into Ravenswood, not with fury, but with a softness that dusted every rooftop in silver and left the orchard trees glazed in shimmering frost. Snow settled quietly over the hedges, the stone paths, and even the pond that once held the heart of night's first bloom. The seasons had turned, but the echoes beneath the soil remained. Inside the manor, Evelina sat by the hearth in the old library, her fingers turning pages of her mother's last journal. Firelight flickered across her face, casting golden reflections into the inked margins, where Seraphine had scribbled a question: "What if healing is not the mending, but the remembering?" She closed the book gently, her mind echoing with the recent past: the ashen path, the mirror of selves, the seed of ending, her father's memory fading into light. Yet here she was. Whole. Changed. The bloom planted in the meadow, now called the second heart, had flourished even through the first frost. Its petals gleamed gold under snowlight, its presence pulsing like a watchful eye, or a star anchored to the earth. And that night, it did something new. It spoke. Not in words. Not in dreams. But in music. A faint humming, barely louder than a whisper, drifted on the wind into the manor's upper tower where Evelina slept. She awoke, eyes wide in the dark, and instinctively reached for her cloak. Clara met her at the stairwell, as if guided by the same pull. "It's singing," she said simply. Outside, the air was bitter, but the sound grew stronger with each step. Agnes and Imogen joined them halfway through the snowy path, bundled and breathless. "I heard it in my sleep," Imogen said. "Like someone humming near my pillow." As they arrived at the second heart, Evelina knelt beside it. The melody grew clearer, a slow, cyclical tune that wrapped around itself like a lullaby or a call. "It's remembering," Evelina murmured. "But not just what we've done, what came before." She placed her palm against the base of the bloom. A shock of warmth radiated up her arm. A vision overtook her. Not a memory, something older. A memory of the land. She saw Ravenswood as it was before the manor stood. A valley of light and vines, tenders of soil who sang into seeds. A circle of guardians planting blooms across the realm, each flower a lock, each garden a whisper to the world, "Sleep, and we will keep watch." Then darkness. A rift torn by greed, or fear, or something nameless. The guardians scattered. Only one remained. Seraphine. And now, Evelina. She gasped, pulling her hand away, breath rising in white clouds. "This is not just a flower. This is the last of a lattice. A network. A chorus." Blackthorn, who had silently joined them from the eastern ridge, spoke for the first time that night. "Then perhaps the time has come to restore the others." They looked at him. "You mean, replant?" Agnes asked. "I mean rekindle," he replied. The next weeks became sacred. Evelina, with the others, mapped the old locations her mother had marked in disappearing ink. There were 12 sites. 12 petals of the original bloom's reach. Some had become ruins. Others, towns. A few were untouched, mere clearings forgotten by time. From the second heart, Evelina took clippings carefully, ritually. Each one placed into a silver case etched with runes. With Clara's guidance, they blended the memory-infused dew with a new herbal infusion to preserve it. These were not flowers, they were seeds of memory. And each one had to be planted by someone who remembered. So she began to call them. Lyria, the parchment-haired traveler, returned first. Then a woman named Callan, who had once tended a cliffside apothecary. Then a boy named Milo, who spoke with trees and claimed they whispered her name before he ever met her. Each received a seed. Each was sent out under moonlight, with scrolls of binding and warmth. Evelina stood beneath the arbor one night, watching the stars blink into existence. Agnes stood beside her, silent. "Do you think it will hold?" Agnes asked. "If it's planted in love," Evelina said, "it will do more than hold. It will sing." On the last day of that frost-laced winter, a letter arrived on the leg of a silver-feathered hawk. Inside was a single sentence. "The 5th has bloomed." It sang your name into the roots. Evelina smiled. The garden was growing. Not just here but everywhere. Not every story needed war. Some needed tending. Remembering. Planting. She returned to the second heart and sat beside it, fingers resting in the soil. The bloom bent slightly toward her. And for the first time, Evelina spoke aloud. "I remember you." The petals shivered. And somewhere, far across the hills, another flower answered. The world was waking. The chorus was returning. And the keeper of petals had only just begun to sing. Spring began to stir the moors surrounding Ravenswood Manor, coaxing tender shoots from frozen earth and painting the landscape in shades of green and gold. The garden was no longer a quiet refuge, it was a living symphony of blossoms, each bloom a note in the great chorus Evelina and her companions had set in motion. Evelina walked the winding paths beneath ancient oaks, her breath forming soft clouds in the crisp morning air. The heart of night stood resplendent in the greenhouse, its golden petals fully unfurled, casting a warm glow that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the earth itself. News had spread beyond the village. Travelers spoke of a young healer with a garden that sang, who could mend wounds and soothe weary souls with tinctures brewed from enchanted blooms. Letters arrived, carried by swift riders and feathered messengers, bringing tales of ailments cured and darkness held at bay. But with growth came change, and with change, new challenges. One afternoon, as Evelina tended to a bed of violet moonflowers, a sudden chill swept through the air. The wind shifted, carrying with it a scent unfamiliar, sharp, metallic, and faintly acrid. Birds ceased their songs, and the flowers seemed to close in warning. Clara appeared beside her, face pale. "The veil thins again," she whispered. "The balance we fought to restore is fragile. Something stirs beyond our sight." Evelina nodded, eyes scanning the horizon where dark clouds gathered. "We must prepare. The chorus is growing, but so too is the silence that seeks to drown it." That evening, beneath a sky heavy with stars, Evelina gathered Agnes, Imogen, Blackthorn, and the travelers who had become her trusted allies. Around a fire in the great hall, they shared tales and strategies, weaving their knowledge like threads in a tapestry of defense. Lyria, with her parchment hair now streaked with silver, spoke of distant lands where gardens similar to Ravenswood's whispered ancient secrets. Callan, steady and wise, offered herbs and rites forgotten by most. Milo, youthful and bright-eyed, carried songs taught by the trees themselves. Together, they formed a circle not just of protection, but of purpose. As midnight approached, Evelina stepped into the greenhouse, the heart of night glowing softly. She lifted a delicate silver bell, its tone pure and clear, and rang it once. The garden answered. Petals quivered, vines stretched, and the air hummed with power. Outside, the wind howled, now a roar, but inside, the garden stood steadfast, its light a beacon against the gathering dark. Evelina closed her eyes and whispered a vow carried on the wind. As long as petals bloom and voices rise, no shadow shall silence the song of the skies. And somewhere, far beyond Ravenswood, other gardens stirred in response, echoes joining the chorus begun by a girl who dared to remember, to fight, and to heal. The keeper of petals and names had sung her first note. The world was listening. The wind carried the scent of rain across the moors, and the skies over Ravenswood Manor darkened with the promise of a coming storm. Autumn had bled into early winter with a quiet persistence, but now the atmosphere thrummed with a restless energy, as if the land itself were bracing for change. Evelina stood at the edge of the garden, the heart of night glowing warmly in her hands, its golden petals vibrant even beneath the gathering clouds. She looked out across the manor's grounds, where the other echo petals had been planted, each a seed of memory, of hope, and of protection. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft footfall. Agnes approached, her expression serious, hands folded tightly before her. "The letters have become urgent," she said. "From Lyria, Callan, even the capital. They speak of shadows moving in places we thought safe." Imogen appeared beside Agnes, her usually light-hearted demeanor replaced by a steady resolve. "I heard from Milo," she added. "He says the forests whisper of things forgotten stirring once more." Evelina nodded, the weight of their words settling over her like a shroud. The ashen path may have been sealed, and the three echoes answered, but the fight was far from over. The balance they'd worked to restore was delicate, and now a new threat gathered strength beyond the veil. Inside the manor, the great hall was alive with movement. Allies gathered, travelers and villagers alike, drawn by the growing legend of Ravenswood's garden and its guardian. Lyria, her silver-streaked hair catching the candlelight, spoke quietly with Callan, while Milo animatedly shared stories with a group of wide-eyed children. Clara and Blackthorn coordinated preparations for the coming storm, brewing tinctures, reinforcing wards, and readying the manor's defenses. Evelina watched them, a surge of gratitude mingling with determination. That evening, as rain began to fall in steady sheets, Evelina convened a council beneath the vaulted ceilings of the library. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment and fresh herbs. "We must strengthen the network," Evelina declared, unfurling a large map dotted with 12 marked sites, locations where echo petals had been planted or were yet to be restored. "Each garden, each bloom is a node in the web that holds back the darkness. If one falls, the rest weaken." Lyria traced a finger along a faded path leading to a ruined manor deep within the northern woods. "There's a place here," she said. "Once a stronghold of the original guardians. It's been lost for decades." Imogen frowned. "If we can rekindle that garden, it could be a beacon." "Then that is where we must go," Evelina said. "But we can't do it alone." Agnes stepped forward, her usual reserve replaced by quiet courage. "We'll go with you." One by one, others nodded, the travelers, the gardeners, even some villagers who had learned to trust the strange magic blossoming at Ravenswood. As the storm raged outside, Evelina packed her mother's grimoire, the vial of language of lost roots, and the precious cutting from the second heart. She fastened the silver crescent pendant around her neck and secured the heart of night in its protective case. Before leaving, she knelt by the golden bloom in the greenhouse. "Thank you," she whispered, "for guiding us this far." The flower's petals shimmered in response, casting dancing lights across the walls. With a final glance at Ravenswood Manor, their home, their battleground, their sanctuary, Evelina and her company stepped into the storm. The night swallowed them. And beyond the veil, something watched. Waiting. Because the garden that remembers never truly forgets. And the keeper of petals and names was coming for it. The road to the northern woods stretched before Evelina and her companions like a ribbon of shadow and mist. The rain had ceased, leaving the earth damp and fragrant, the scent of wet leaves and moss thick in the air. Ravenswood Manor receded behind them, a glowing ember against the encroaching twilight. The company moved with purpose. Lyria led with quiet confidence, her sharp eyes scanning the dense trees for signs of the lost manor. Callan followed, his steady hands clutching a satchel of herbs and tools. Agnes and Imogen guarded the rear, alert to every sound, every flicker of movement. Blackthorn trailed close behind Evelina, his grizzled face set in grim determination. After hours of trekking through tangled undergrowth and weaving between ancient oaks, the trees parted suddenly, revealing a clearing cradling a sprawling ruin. The lost manor lay before them, its crumbled stone walls entwined with wild vines and flowers that glowed faintly in the dim light, ghostly echoes of the garden that once was. Evelina's heart quickened. This was the place her mother had written of, the stronghold of the original guardians, now forgotten and swallowed by time. They approached cautiously, stepping over shattered columns and moss-covered steps. The air hummed with latent magic, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse faintly, as if the earth itself remembered. Inside the manor's skeleton, they found a central courtyard dominated by a massive stone pedestal. Carved into its surface was a pattern, an intricate lattice of vines and stars, matching the symbols Evelina had seen in her mother's journals. At the center of the pedestal lay a hollow, dark, and empty. "It's waiting," Evelina whispered. They set to work. Lyria and Callan began clearing the overgrowth, their hands gentle as they tended to the fragile blossoms still clinging to life amid the ruins. Agnes and Imogen arranged the cuttings from Ravenswood's echo petals, placing each with reverence into the soil of the pedestal's hollow. Evelina prepared the ritual, drawing the circle of ash and moon salt as prescribed in the grimoire. Clara, who had joined them with supplies, handed her the vial of language of lost roots. "This will let you hear what the garden remembers," she said softly. As night fell, the stars blinked awake, scattered across the velvet sky like shards of broken glass. Evelina stood at the center of the circle, the vial held tightly in her palm. She uncorked it and breathed in the scent, a blend of earth, dew, and something ancient. Closing her eyes, she whispered the invocation her mother had taught her. "Roots that bind and flowers that dream." Echoes carried on moonbeams gleam. "Speak now, guardian of forgotten light. Awaken the bloom, reclaim the night." The earth beneath them trembled. Vines unfurled with a hiss, petals blossomed in bursts of radiant color, and the lattice on the pedestal glowed with a fierce silver light. Evelina opened her eyes. The garden was alive. And it was singing. Soft at first, a melody woven of rustling leaves and distant chimes. Then stronger, richer, a chorus of whispers and harmonies threading through the night air. The ruins breathed. The garden remembered. And within that song, Evelina heard voices ancient, sorrowful, hopeful. the voices of the original guardians. They spoke not in words, but in feelings, trust, sacrifice, courage. Agnes and Imogen stood in awe, their faces bathed in the garden's glow. "This is more than magic," Agnes said. "It's a legacy." Lyria nodded. "A living memory." As the song reached a crescendo, the hollow in the pedestal filled with a glowing orb, an orb of pure light, pulsating like a heartbeat. Evelina reached out and cradled it. "This is the lost heart," she said, voice trembling. "The final seed of the guardians." The orb's warmth seeped into her bones, filling her with strength and clarity. But with the gift came a warning. The wind shifted sharply. From the shadows beyond the clearing, figures emerged, dark shapes moving with unnatural grace. The remnants of those who had sought to unbind the ashen path. Evelina raised the orb, its light flaring like dawn. "Stand together," she commanded. The companions formed a circle, their hands linked, their voices rising in harmony with the garden's song. Light and shadow collided. The battle had only just begun. And the keeper of petals and names stood ready. Night had fallen like a velvet curtain over the northern woods, wrapping the lost manor in shadows deeper than any Evelina had encountered. The glowing orb, the lost heart, pulsed steadily in her hands, casting soft, golden light across the faces of her companions. Their circle tightened, a united front against the encroaching darkness. From the blackened tree-line, figures emerged, twisted and ethereal shapes born not from flesh but from despair and broken memories. Their eyes glimmered with malevolence as they advanced, tendrils of shadow slipping between the ancient trees like smoke. Lyria raised her voice, chanting words that shimmered with ancient power. Around them, the garden responded, flowers bent away from the shadows, vines curled protectively, and the earth beneath their feet thrummed with vitality. Callan moved swiftly, drawing sigils in the dirt that flared briefly with blue light, sealing small pockets of space against the intruders. Agnes and Imogen wielded staffs entwined with living ivy, their tips igniting with radiant flame as they stood firm at Evelina's sides. Evelina lifted the lost heart, its light blazing fiercely as she spoke the invocation taught by her mother and learned through her journey. By petals bound and roots entwined, we call the guardians of earth and mind. From shadow's grasp, we claim the night, and shield this realm with sacred light. The shadows recoiled, their forms wavering like smoke caught in a storm. But they did not retreat. Instead, they surged forward, howling phantoms of forgotten grief and anger, seeking to tear through the wards and unravel the garden's song. Evelina felt the weight of history pressing down, a struggle that stretched back generations, battles fought beneath stone and soil, lives given to hold the veil. With a cry, she released a pulse of light from the lost heart. It spread in ripples, washing over the attackers like a tide of dawn. One by one, they dissolved, whispering names and regrets as they faded, voices echoing like distant thunder. But at the center of the storm, a single figure remained. Tall, cloaked in shifting shadows, eyes glowing with ancient fire. The intruder who had haunted their path, the shadow who wore Gregory Hawthorne's face. Evelina's heart faltered. "Why do you linger?" she demanded. The figure's voice was a cold wind, scraping across stone. "To remind you," it said, "that memory is a chain. That legacy is a burden. That not all roots grow toward light." Evelina steadied herself, clutching the lost heart. "Then I will break that chain." She called upon the garden's strength. The 12 petals planted across the realm, the echoes answered, the bonds forged in fire and dew. Light erupted from the orb, a brilliant blaze that pierced the shadow's core. With a howl, the figure shattered, broken into 1,000 glimmers that scattered on the wind. Silence fell. The companions stood breathless, the garden calm once more. Evelina lowered the lost heart, its light softening to a gentle glow. They had won this battle. But the war for memory and legacy was far from over. As dawn crept over the northern woods, Evelina whispered a vow carried on the morning breeze. "For every root that trembles, for every petal that falls, I will stand keeper of echoes, guardian of light." The garden answered. And the keeper of petals and names smiled. Because she knew the song was eternal. And she was its voice. The sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long shadows over Ravenswood Manor and the surrounding woods. A cool breeze whispered through the branches, carrying a faint scent of jasmine and something more elusive, an ancient promise awakening. Evelina stood on the veranda, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the last light of day mingled with the encroaching dusk. The name from her dreams, Veles, echoed in her mind like a melody half remembered. The stone with that name carved into it weighed heavy in her satchel, a silent riddle waiting to be unraveled. Clara approached quietly, her steps soft on the wooden floor. "You've been restless," she observed gently. "The garden feels different tonight, as if it's holding its breath." Evelina nodded. "I feel it too. Something is stirring, something waiting to be remembered." As darkness settled, the companions gathered in the greenhouse. The heart of night and the second heart glowed softly, their petals shimmering with an otherworldly light. Evelina placed the stone inscribed with Veles on a pedestal at the center, surrounding it with moonflower petals and incense. She began to chant the invocation her mother had taught her, the words flowing like a river through the still air. "Roots of the past, branches of time. Awaken the spirit, ancient and prime. Veles, arise from shadow and dust. In petals and memory, we place our trust." The air grew thick with energy. The petals around the stone stirred, swirling in a gentle vortex of light. From the heart of the circle, a figure began to materialize, tall, cloaked in shimmering robes woven from moonlight and shadow. Veles. His eyes held the depth of forgotten forests and the wisdom of countless seasons. He bowed his head to Evelina, a silent acknowledgement of her call. "You have awakened me," he spoke, voice resonant and calming. "The garden remembers, and so do I." Evelina stepped forward, heart pounding. "Who are you?" What is your role in this legacy? Veles smiled, a gesture both kind and sorrowful. I am the watcher between worlds, the keeper of forgotten echoes. Bound to the gardens of old, I have awaited the return of the keeper of petals and names to restore balance. He gestured to the blooming flowers around them. Each petal, each bloom you have nurtured, sings a part of the song that holds the veil together. But the song is incomplete without the voice of the watcher. Agnes and Imogen watched in awe as Veles extended a hand, touching the heart of night. The petals responded, glowing brighter, their light weaving into intricate patterns that danced across the glass walls. Veles turned to Evelina. Your journey has only just begun. Together, we will mend the fractures in the world's memory, strengthen the bonds between realms, and protect the light that others seek to extinguish. Evelina felt a surge of hope and purpose. With Veles by her side, the weight of legacy seemed lighter, the path clearer. Outside, the stars blinked awake, aligning in patterns that mirrored the gardens below. The chorus of petals and roots grew louder, a symphony heralding a new chapter. And Evelina knew, without doubt, that with Veles awakened, the keeper of petals and names was ready to face whatever dawn awaited. The garden was alive. And so was the promise of its eternal song. The night sky stretched endlessly above Ravenswood Manor, embroidered with constellations that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the garden's heartbeat. Within the greenhouse, Evelina and Veles stood side by side, the golden glow of the heart of night and the soft luminescence of the second heart casting dancing shadows across the ancient tomes and whispered secrets. Veles traced a finger over a map spread across the table, a lattice of gardens and sacred sites woven across the land. The echoes you've rekindled form a tapestry, he murmured, but there are frayed threads, places where shadow seeps through the weave. Evelina's eyes narrowed. You mean the places where the seal weakens? Where the ashen path's remnants linger? Veles nodded gravely. Yes. And worse, those places attract forces that seek to unravel all that has been rebuilt. As if on cue, the chamber's air shifted, and a soft rustling echoed from the shadows. Agnes and Imogen appeared at the door, faces pale but resolute. An urgent message, Agnes said, holding out a folded parchment sealed with dark wax. Evelina broke the seal and read quickly. To the keeper of petals and names. The boundary near Eldermoor is thinning. Strange lights and sounds disturb the villagers. We fear a breach. Send aid swiftly, lest darkness spill once more. Veles's gaze hardened. Eldermoor was one of the first gardens lost to shadow. Its roots lie deep, but its heart has long been forgotten. Evelina folded the letter with care. Then we must go. Rekindle that flame before the darkness spreads. Preparations were swift. Clara packed herbs and potions, Blackthorn readied their mounts. The travelers Lyria, Callan, and Milo joined the company, their resolve matching Evelina's own. As dawn broke, the group set forth toward Eldermoor, the weight of history pressing upon their shoulders but tempered by the light of the gardens they carried within them. The journey was arduous. Thick fog cloaked the woods, twisting paths, and hiding unseen dangers. Whispers drifted on the wind, faint echoes of sorrow and warning. Upon reaching Elder Moor, the sight that met them was grim. The once vibrant garden lay in ruin, petals withered, vines blackened, and a palpable chill hung heavy. Veles stepped forward, extending his hands over the soil. The song has been silenced here. We must sing it anew. Evelina knelt, planting a cutting from the second heart into the earth. As she did, she began to chant, her voice steady and clear. Roots that slumber, rise, and sing. Echoes bind in blossoming. From shadow's grasp, reclaim the light. Restore the day, reclaim the night. One by one, the companions followed, their voices weaving into a tapestry of sound that stirred the garden from its slumber. Gradually, color returned, soft greens unfurling, buds swelling with life, petals opening to the sun. But as light blossomed, a shadow stirred at the forest's edge, watching, waiting. Evelina's heart tightened. The battle was far from over. Yet with every garden reclaimed, every petal reborn, the keeper of petals and names grew stronger. And the eternal song of the garden continued. The journey from Elder Moor back to Ravenswood Manor was heavy with both hope and caution. Each step forward was a reminder that their work was far from over. Yet the revival of Elder Moor's garden had rekindled a light within Evelina and her companions, a beacon against the encroaching shadows. Back at Ravenswood, preparations began for the last and most sacred ritual, the binding of the final bloom. This was no ordinary flower, but a symbol, a culmination of every seed planted, every echo answered, and every shadow repelled. The greenhouse was transformed into a sanctuary of light and scent. Herbs hung from rafters, candles flickered on every surface, and the heart of night stood at the center, glowing with an intensity that filled the entire space. Veles, standing beside Evelina, spoke softly, "Tonight, we bind not just petals but souls. The garden's legacy depends on it." Clara, Agnes, Imogen, Lyria, Callan, Milo, and Blackthorn formed a circle, hands joined. Evelina stepped forward, carrying a small bud brilliantly golden and shimmering with dew. With a steady voice, she began the incantation. From root to bloom, from seed to sky, we bind the past, the future not. In petals pure, in hearts made true. The garden's song begins anew. As the words left her lips, the bud unfurled, releasing a cascade of sparkling pollen that floated like stars throughout the room. The garden responded, a chorus of light, color, and life that transcended the physical. It was as if every flower, every leaf, every whisper of wind joined in the celebration. At that moment, a warm breeze swept through the manor, carrying with it the voices of those who had come before, Seraphine, Gregory, and the original guardians. Their echoes whispered blessings, gratitude, and farewell. Evelina felt tears streaming down her face, not from sorrow but from the profound connection to all who had tended this legacy. Days turned into weeks, and Ravenswood Manor blossomed like never before. The gardens were alive with color, fragrance, and a magic that pulsed gently beneath the soil. Visitors came from far and wide, not just seeking healing but to witness the wonder of a garden reborn. Evelina stood at the greenhouse door, watching the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky with hues of rose and gold. Belys joined her, his presence calm and steady. "You have fulfilled your promise," he said. "The garden thrives because of you." Evelina smiled softly. "We all did it together." She turned to look at the heart of night, now a towering bloom whose petals seemed to hold the very light of the moon. "The garden will never sleep," she whispered. "And neither will I." Belys nodded. "You are no longer just a keeper of petals. You are the guardian of memory, hope, and life itself." As stars began to twinkle overhead, Evelina felt a deep peace settle within her, a peace born from trials faced, bonds forged, and a legacy secured. The garden's eternal song played softly on the breeze, a melody of resilience, love, and renewal. And Evelina Hawthorne, keeper of the eternal garden, listened with a heart open to all the echoes yet to come. Tuta, the keeper of petals and names, an enchanted tale of legacy and light. Amota. Step into the mystical world of Ravenswood Manor, where Evelina Hawthorne embarks on a journey to protect an ancient legacy hidden in the heart of night, a magical bloom entwined with her family's fate. Facing shadows that seek to unravel time itself, Evelina unites with companions and awakened guardians to rekindle lost gardens, confront haunting memories, and defend the fragile balance between light and dark. This epic fantasy saga weaves themes of memory, courage, and renewal across enchanted forests, hidden chambers, and timeless battles. Join the keeper of petals and names as she embraces her destiny to heal not just gardens, but the echoes of the past and the hope of the future. A spellbinding tale of magic, mystery, and the eternal song of nature's resilience.